Welcome back to GraphiteHub's interview series. This series is focused on graphite recycling. So far, we've focused on the rise of graphite recycling, the science behind it, and now we're going to turn to the commercial aspect of it. Who out there is graphite? Who out there is recycling graphite? And then also, we're going to look at the future of it. So today, again, we're joined by Dr. Luke Sweeney. Welcome back, Luke.
Thanks for having me, Harry.
Fantastic. So let's kick this off, Luke. Who are you seeing that's leading the charge when it comes to recycling, and more specifically for graphite?
Oh, who's leading the charge? Everyone. Basically, nobody except China. Everyone in China's leading the charge. Just any big Chinese recycler is going to be heavily involved. Not in terms of graphite recycling specifically, but just in recycling in general. So there are like the big Chinese companies like Brump and GM. They're very they're very large. They're very integrated, and they've got they've got their partnerships with their respective they've got offtake agreements for their for their material, and they're consistent agreements. It's funny, just to give the viewer some perspective, is sometimes we'll see in the I was speaking to some people in China, and they would just say, "Oh yeah, anything less than 5,000 tons per year, that's a pilot plant." They're like, "Oh yeah, that's fine. That's just like an experimental plant." And but then in the UK or in Europe, you see that's like when someone makes a plant that's like 2,000 tons a year or 3,000 tons a year, black mass input. They're like, "Whoa, big press announcement! We're doing a great job." Which And that's definitely good. I'm certainly not saying that's bad that they do it, but he's just saying like the scale in China is just crazy.
Yeah.
And we will cover articles of like a big announcement in China would be like 20,000-30,000 tons a year of black mass capacity, or recycling capacity coming online, which is just nuts.
Yeah. And are we seeing any players in the West?
We are seeing, so there's a difference between there are lots of people in the West. There are certainly lots of people in the West who are trying to get in the recycling space. But the problem is that the difference between them and companies in China is that companies in China are actually doing it, right? So the companies in the West, there's loads and loads of companies, and there's certainly loads of interest in the West. And we're definitely working hard, but I think we're just we're just so far behind in terms of that. So we're so some examples of some companies is you've got like Via Anode is a really good example. I think they're a Canadian company. We've also got we've also been having. I'm very careful to talk about like potential companies like long term, just because of we see lots of partnerships get formed and then get quietly discontinued as well.
Yeah.
Well, so there was a really good big example of that. I think Orano and Stellantis had a partnership. They had a really big graphite recycling partnership. And to be fair, these are initial like agreements, and they're just like, well, we're going to see if it works. Hopefully it would, but sometimes it doesn't work, which is fine. And just to give the viewers, Orano is a French nuclear company, and a big component in nuclear reactors is graphite. So they have graphite experts. They know how graphite works, right? But using graphite in a nuclear reactor versus as an electrical versus as an energy material is very different applications. So they had a partnership which they've discontinued. Talga and Arubis, I think. Yeah, they've got a partnership. Again, we'll see where it goes. Hopefully, I wish for the best for all these companies. I want them to do well. I want them to recycle graphite. So hopefully that will go. But again, they're just kind of, they've got some tech. They're just trialing it. So we'll see how that goes. I think also Superior Graphite is active in the United States as well. And I think I saw a long time ago, maybe about 2 years ago, they were looking at doing some graphite recycling stuff, or they were looking at like integrating it into their line.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, so there's a few players in the space then.
There's certainly a few players in the space, yeah, but it's just the scales. It's just the scales. And I think the problem now is just that the graphite is so cheap. The price of graphite is so cheap at the moment. It's really tough. It's really tough.
Cool. And then so looking ahead to say 2030, 2040, how big of a part do you see graphite recycling playing in the supply chain for batteries?
So, assuming that graphite is still used as an anode material, that's something we've got to, and that's something we've got to, us graphite guys, we've got to come to terms with that. That graphite might not be in batteries for the whole time.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, as a graphite guy, I want them to be graphite. I want graphite to be in batteries forever, right? Keeps me in the job, right? But but it will make batteries. In theory, if we get an improvement for graphite, we could see graphite not being used in batteries. So,
but what are your thoughts on, I guess, like silicon with it being complemented with graphite? Do you see that? Yeah. That seems to be what I'm hearing, the more the path that we're looking to go down, rather than a full replacement of graphite.
Yeah, so loads of people have been talking about silicon. To give people some context, graphite's theoretical capacity is 372 milliamp hours per gram. So you get 372 milliamps if you discharge it in 1 hour per gram of graphite. So it's pretty high number. 372 is pretty good. It's a great number. But silicon's specific capacity is 4,200, so it's huge. So you could use like almost like over 10 times less silicon in theory. But the problem is silicon falls apart. So if you buy a battery with a silicon anode, like let's say you buy a car with a silicon anode in it, the first charge you're going to get maybe like 1,000 miles on it, which is great. You're like, wow, I'm never going to need to charge this. But then after the 10th charge, you've probably got 50 miles on it. So you'll be a little upset. Yeah.
So it degrades quite a bit over time.
Yeah, it degrades quite significantly, and that's because the problem is that it's so good because it expands so much when it intercalates lithium. So so your silicon particle expands so much when it intercalates lithium, and when it deintercalates lithium, it contracts, and this causes cracks, and then these cracks cause this thing called this excess SEI layer to form, surface electrolyte interface layer to form, and that's because the surface of the silicon will react with the electrolyte. So yeah, it's great, and because it's so great, it's actually bad. Which is so personally, when I was working in academia, I think people have known that silicon is really good at intercalating lithium for I think 25 years, at least 25 years. So we've been researching it for 25 years, and what's still being used in batteries, it's graphite. So I don't think we're going to see pure silicon anodes, to be honest. I think that we're much more likely to see lithium metal anodes before like silicon anodes becomes viable, to be honest, because I think it's just we've put in a lot of money in research, and there's been lots of startups, there's been lots of companies trying to do it. And again, I would love for silicon to do it, but I am a bit skeptical as to just how. I think the problems are a bit too difficult to overcome. And then we've done some crazy things like nano architectures, like all sorts of things. And I think at best we get to maybe 10 to 15% silicon in anodes. And I think personally, even they're just put into give people extra range. So when you advertise a car, you can say, oh, it's got 400 something miles range, but actually after 5 years, like I think a lot of that range will deplete because of the silicon component. It's kind of becomes aged a lot more excessively than the graphite component does.
Right. Okay.
So, that's the silicon front. I think with what us graphite guys have to be more worried about is solid state batteries, because there's been lots of lots of companies have been saying they're going to make solid state batteries. Dyson famously said they're going to make solid state batteries, and I think in 2016 they said they were going to make solid state batteries, or it was like in I remember thinking, what, they're going to make solid state batteries? And then they had this whole big press announcement, and then all of a sudden, like a few years later, they quietly said, oh, we're closing down now, because it turns out making solid state batteries is really hard.
Yeah.
But we have seen, you've got to be very careful with all the hype. A lot of companies love hyping, and it's often the companies that don't hype are actually the companies that seem to be like secretly doing things.
That's what I'm seeing quite a bit these days. A lot of companies in stealth mode.
They are in stealth mode, yeah. And I think because you don't, if you're not trying to generate investment, you don't
need to be putting up presentations and trying to hype it up, right?
Exactly, because if you've got something that's work, you're like, well, let's just get it to work, So we're seeing a lot of that. So I think we're seeing a lot of like semi-solid state. We're seeing some advancements in that. And I think once we get, and also I saw an announcement about CATL having like a anodeless LFP battery, which I thought was nuts. I thought I honestly, some of the announcements that are coming out of China lately, I have to like reread it, because I'm thinking, this is crazy. How have they done this? They are so behind. They're so far ahead technologically than us, in the West, which is nuts.
So give it another 20 years and where are we going to be at, right?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know, but just follow China. Look at what China's doing. But yeah, so I think hopefully we would need to recycle graphite, and if we do, let's say if we do need to still use graphite, I think that the problem is that demand for, because we're remaking every single vehicle with an EV in theory, right? Demand will be very high for a long time, and unfortunately we won't be able to build that circularity, because like the lead acid battery industry, I think it was like 90, it was like in the 90s of like percent of like lead is recycled in lead acid batteries, which is really, really high, and it's because it's a hazardous waste, it's toxic, and we actually have to make more lead. We actually have to mine more lead because we can't. We demand. Oh no, it was like 90-something% of the supply of lead acid batteries contain like recycled material, or of the lead in modern batteries is from recycled material. And the only reason why it's not 100% is because that we want more lead acid batteries than we historically have made. So we've achieved almost complete circularity in the lead acid battery sector. So we can definitely do it. But yeah, it's just that we need to have so much end of life batteries on the market to achieve complete circularity. But I definitely see, assuming graphite is still in the picture, which I hope it is. I want everyone to win. I want graphite to still be in the picture. Yeah, but I hope we could see a lot, like between 20-30%, assuming that they can get the recycling done. Okay.
So Luke, from an OEM or battery maker's perspective, what is the biggest concern with battery recycled graphite?
In theory, there shouldn't be a concern, right? Because in theory there shouldn't be a concern, because often if the OEM gives the recycler a spec, they'll say, just this is the spec for the graphite. I want it to be like this. The recycler will be. It'll be very easy for them to get that spec. They'll say, okay, this is our target and this is what we've got to achieve. Well, I mean, it'll be easy. As long as they've got that spec, they can they should in theory be able to do it, right? But the problem is that getting it consistently. So for example, let's say we send, and this often happens with batteries as well. You ask for one battery from someone, they'll send you their best battery. You ask for then 100 batteries, they'll send you the best 100 batteries, and then when you suddenly start getting loads and loads of batteries from them, the quality might go down a bit, just because they're making these at scale now, so there might be some like production problems, etc. So the problem is that when you're getting a reliable, like a consistent supply of graphite from a secondary source, the problem is that if there's any change, if it's maintaining consistency, so if there's any change in where this recycler or where whoever you're buying the secondary graphite from gets their graphite, so let's say they start recycling a different type of EV, which this different type of EV used a different type of graphite, right? So, and they haven't accounted for that, and then all of a sudden you're putting it into your batteries, and suddenly your batteries aren't performing as they were, and it'll be great if they're performing even better. That could happen. They could perform even better than you initially expected, but they could perform worse. So I think a consistency of supply is very difficult. Is very worried, and that's what a lot of people are quite worried about. And when you see a lot of people putting battery grade graphite into, well, we're using secondary source battery grade graphite, they would often mix it with primary material, because they just want, if you mix like 5 or 10%, you still have that. You can rely, generally if it's from a mine, it's a lot more secure. It's a lot more reliable. Or most OEMs have lots of experience dealing with mines as well, so they know what to expect when things change. So I think it's a new field, and also just maintaining consistency of supply.
Great, fantastic. Well, Luke, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on our series. It's been fantastic. Your insights are valuable, and I look forward to doing this again sometime soon.
Thanks very much.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning into this multi-part series on graphite recycling. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any recommendations on guests or topics that you'd like me to focus on, please reach out to me. Apart from that, we'll see you next time.